Greetings, my friends and my enemies. Welcome to the 200th episode of Stating the Obvious. For 199 episodes, I have brought you the truth. Nothing but the truth, the whole truth. I've hurt your feelings, I've pissed you off, I've called you names. 200th episode. Fuck yes. Oh, you can scream, shout, whine, cry, snivel, piss, and motherfucking moan. You can shove your opinion up your ass. That way Obama's cock has something to keep it company. Don't forget, the ever-present, the most likely third possibility, you are wrong and I am right. Yes, I am the great one himself, and I am right. I have always been right. I will always be right. I'm being right now. Even when I'm wrong, I am still righter than you will ever fucking be. And this, my friends, is the Stating the Obvious podcast, the weapons platform from which I launch the cruise missile of my intellect that homes in on and destroys stupid motherfuckers all around the world. Oh, they're stupid motherfuckers everywhere. So I walk outside, I open my eyes, I see stupid motherfuckers. If I picked up a rock and threw it, I'd hit a stupid motherfucker. If I fired up the M60 machine gun and just randomly sprayed bullets, I'd hit stupid motherfuckers. Why? Because stupid motherfuckers, they're all over the place. I'm fucking surrounded by them. This is episode 200. As I have already mentioned, I am the Great One himself, founder of the Cynical Libertarian Society, CYNLIBSOC.com on the interwebs. In the control room on the other side of the glass is the lovely and adorable Randy, the sound engineer. And then, of course, if you want to send us an email, you can send us your emails. They send those to god@CYNLIBSOC.com. That's God, dog, spelled backwards. God@CYNLIBSOC.com. Send naked pictures, send your confessions, send your praise, send your hatred, send whatever the fuck you want to send. Just remember, the NSA will be reading it. Today's topic, my friends and my enemies, is victimhood. I wrapped up a short time ago a 4-part series where I talked about fear, where I talked about how statists are driven by fear, how people who live in a constant state of fear are easier for the state to control. About how, in fact, without fear, there can be no state. Right? If you're not afraid that you will not be able to provide for yourself in your old age, you don't need Social Security. If you're not afraid that you can't get medical care on your own, you don't need Obamacare. If you're not afraid that you can't negotiate for your own wages or start your own business, then you don't need minimum wage. If you're not afraid that nobody will build a road so that you can get bottled water instead of drinking water that comes out of the tap, then you don't need to say, but without the government, who will build the roads? Every fucking thing, that is statism. Every statist opinion, viewpoint, perspective, belief, mantra, whatever you want to call it, everything that is statism can be traced to fear. Without fear, there is no statism. Without fear, statism cannot fucking exist. Okay, we've established this. Why are all these people afraid? Well, as I've said before, these people are all afraid because they are incompetent. They know they're not competent enough to provide their own health care. They know they're not competent enough to build roads. They know they're not competent enough to negotiate for their own wages. They know that they lack competency. But nobody wants to come up and say, well, I'm afraid, and thus I need the state to provide for me because I'm incompetent. But nobody wants to admit to being incompetent. So if you're going to understand a statist, you have to understand, you have to understand that they desire the state because of their own fear. The state thrives on the fear, so it's a mutual relationship. But you will never get a statist to admit that they are incompetent. It's not going to happen. No statist will ever say, I am incompetent at running my own life. So how, in the mind of a statist, how does the statist justify her own fear that makes her support Obama murdering people in foreign countries with flying robots? How does the statist support his fear that allows him to stand there and support the police shooting tear gas and beating unarmed civilian protesters? How does the statist justify her fear, which allows the prison industrial complex to thrive? How does the statist justify his incompetence at being able to deal with the self-defense of himself and everyone around him that allows him to justify living in a police state and having the TSA touch little boys' penises and all this other stuff? How do people, statists I should say, they're not people, they're statists, how do statists justify this fear they have, which feeds the state, without admitting to their own incompetence? It's simple, my friends. It's very, very simple. Victimhood. You see, the statist sees themselves, himself, herself, itself. The statist sees itself not as incompetent, but as a victim. This is another key difference between the statist and the anarcho-capitalist. We, the anarcho-capitalist, see ourselves as being competent. Because we have self-awareness, we also recognize there are fields in which we are incompetent. For example, I am incompetent in the field of brain surgery. I cannot perform neurosurgery. Thus, if somebody else came to me and they needed neurosurgery, I would not attempt to perform neurosurgery upon them. However, the difference between me and a statist, as a statist at this point, their fear would override everything and they would start screeching for Obamacare in their nasty, filthy, shrill little voices. While an anarcho-capitalist would recognize his own incompetence to perform neurosurgery and thus seek out a qualified neurosurgeon and enter into negotiations about how much money or resources need to be exchanged with the neurosurgeon in order to perform neurological brain surgery upon the person who needs it. The statist is incompetent at doing that. The statist is incompetent at negotiating for their needs. The statist is incompetent at recognizing their own incompetency. The anarcho-capitalist recognizes his own competencies, his own incompetencies, and in the areas where he is not able to perform a needed function, he negotiates with other people to have that function performed. And the anarcho-capitalist, of course, seeks and chooses to do this without using violence, unlike the statist. The statist hides her incompetency behind the victimhood. This is why the victim industrial complex is so important in the United States. And it is an industrial complex. Victimhood, just like the prison systems, just like the military, manufacturers, just like the police departments, victimhood is an industrial complex. The amount of money that is made by the state and by the parasites on victimhood is massive. It's fucking massive. I talked in a couple of casts just recently about seeing all of the handicapped people here in Fort Collins in the park having a rally about how they're discriminated against, despite the fact that they have wheelchairs. Some of them have motorized wheelchairs. Some of them have the vans that have the ramps. Not even a ramp, a fucking elevator. The elevator comes down, you drive your wheelchair on it, the elevator goes up, you drive in, the elevator folds up on its own, you drive around in the van, even though you're in a fucking wheelchair. I talked about how these people, everything they have, these vehicles, these wheelchairs, their regular medical care, their medical attendants, as in people, as in nurses who take care, all this stuff, it's all paid for by the government. These people have the cushiest life on the planet Earth. They have to actually pay out of their own pocket for none of that. And yet, they're standing out there, again, they're in wheelchairs, they're standing. Oh, I'm so fucking insensitive. I'm doing that entirely on purpose because that's how little I think about these cocksucking fuckers. They're standing out there in their fucking wheelchairs that my tax money paid for, and they're whining about how they are discriminated against. Because these people, and I use the term people loosely because they're statists, not people, these statists are victims. And this victimhood makes a lot of money. The entire social worker system in our country, it's all about victims. We have all these organizations. We have some here in Fort Collins, like Turning Point and Realities for Children and all this other stuff. These are organizations that help children who are abused or drug addicts or alcoholics or whatnot and so forth and so on. They help children who are victims. But they don't do anything to prevent the children from becoming victims in the first place. Because you see, if you don't have alcoholic children, you can't make money by helping alcoholic children not be alcoholic anymore. This is, as I've talked about over and over before, this is the problem with all of these victim-based services. And as I've said before, the government itself is a victim-based service, right? Everything about the government is based on their being victims. If there were no victims of crime, we would need no police, no court system, no prisons. If there were no victims of terrorism, there would be no TSA, Department of Homeland Security. If there were no victims of foreign wars, there would be no Department of Defense. If there were no victims of poverty, or if, as you hear it told by the statists, victims of the rich people oppressing them and taking their money and so forth and so on, if there were no victims of poverty, there would be no welfare system. Everything the government provides is based on victimhood. The same thing with these organizations which are manned, I should say womaned, almost entirely by social workers. There's a couple of accountants and stuff thrown in there to count the beans, but most of this stuff, this is all people who went to college to get a degree in social working. A job that requires victims. When you see somebody who is majoring in social work at college and they say to you, well, I want to be a social worker because I want to help people, that's complete horseshit. Because if you help people stop being victims, there's no more victims. And if you're a social worker and there's no more victims, you don't have a job anymore. Nobody who is a social worker wants to help other people. Because if you help other people, you eliminate your job in a victim-based economy. Right, as I've said, this is what differentiates, for example, manufacturing an automobile. You want to manufacture an automobile, you want someone to buy it, you want to solve their problem. Their problem is they don't have an automobile. You sell them an automobile, they don't need to buy another automobile. Other people will need automobiles, and needing an automobile is a need that makes people better, and it leads to greater opportunities for people. You can sell your automobiles. People will keep buying them. With victimhood, you don't want to fix. It's like being a therapist. If somebody comes in, you don't want to fix them in the same therapy session, then you don't make as much money. With victimhood, you want people to keep being victims. Just like you want people to keep buying cars. But buying a car means that a person, first of all, has to have money to buy a car, and then once they have the car gives them opportunities. They can travel, they can get to work, they can go on vacation, they can start their own business, they can take their kids to soccer practice, whatever. A car opens up opportunities. The victimhood, keeping people in a perpetual state of victimhood, does not open opportunities for them. Providing someone with a car opens opportunities. Providing someone with ongoing victimhood does not provide them with opportunities. Just the opposite. It destroys their lives. And of course, automobile manufacturing, because it's been bailed out by the government and is actually not a very good free market example of what I'm trying to illustrate, but it just came out of my mouth. I mean, they have their own version of this, right? The automobile corporations don't want to see automobiles replaced with anything else. And so they have an incentive to perpetuate the need for automobiles by making sure nothing comes to market that will render the automobile useless. Just as the social worker has an incentive to make sure that even though maybe this particular victim right here is quote-unquote cured, maybe this particular child is no longer an alcoholic, but the social worker has no incentive to prevent more children from becoming alcoholics. The social worker wants more children to become alcoholics, which destroys their lives. The automobile manufacturer wants more people to want automobiles and buy them, but wanting an automobile and buying it does not necessarily destroy your life, unless you took out a big loan on it that you can't afford to pay off, and yada, 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 right? We can always find exceptions. victimhood is power. Remember, the statist is a statist because it is afraid. The reason it is afraid is because it is incompetent. The reason the statist is incompetent is because it has no power. By power, I don't mean the power to launch nuclear weapons at third world countries or some shit. I mean power as in the ability to change and improve their own lives. The ability to negotiate with other people. The ability to get what you desire by either doing work to create it on your own, right? You want a house. You go out, you cut down some trees, you build a log cabin. You create it through your own work and effort and planning. Or you acquire it by trade. You want a house, so you trade somebody money or goods or services in return for a house. I mean, those are the two ways anarcho-capitalists achieve things. They either create them or they purchase them. For the statist who is incompetent, neither of these things are an option. The statist cannot create on their own, and the statist has no idea how to negotiate, how to exchange value, at least not without the help of the state, to come up with affirmative action and minimum wage laws and regulations about who's allowed to buy what and who's allowed to sell what and all of this other stuff. So the statist has no power. That's where victimhood comes in. See, the victimhood, being a victim, is how the statist gets power. The victims at the rally in the park in their wheelchairs, they want more free stuff, but there's no way for them to get more free stuff unless the free stuff is taken away from somebody else and given to them for free, because they're not going to get free stuff just by existing. I mean, they've already got free vans, they've got free wheelchairs, they've got free wheelchair ramps, they've got free ADHD laws. Did you know, I was reading this. I'm going to throw out a couple of things that I'm going to talk about more in depth later. I was just reading something in the CSU Collegian, that's the college newspaper here, about, it said in there that if somebody has a service dog, it is illegal to ask them why they have a service dog. Why? Because these people are playing victims, and they don't want you to know that the reason they have a service dog is bullshit. It's like I talked about some odd episodes ago. I found out here in Colorado you can get a handicap tag for your car if you're short. I'm not talking about short like 3 feet, like a dwarf or a midget or whatever the politically correct word is that they don't like. I don't give a fuck. You're short. Go fuck yourself. I'm not talking about that kind of short. I'm talking about like 5'1" short. You can get a fucking handicap tag for that because you're a fucking victim. And without the victim status of being short, you don't get to park in the handicap parking. But when you get that victim status, that gives you power. That gives you power to park in the special parking place, the one close to the doors, the one that's reserved for the special people. I've talked in the past about my friend from many, many years ago, Kenneth, back in Houston. He had a fake leg. He had a plastic leg. And he had the handicap parking. sticker, tag. And he refused to park in the handicapped spaces. He wouldn't do it because he said, there's other people out there who are a lot more handicapped than I am. There's people in wheelchairs and shit like that. They need these positions. I don't. I have a wooden leg, but I can fucking walk across the parking lot. Because he chose not to play the victim card. He chose not to waller in the victimness. He was by no stretch of imagination an anarcho-capitalist, but he was a step above the average statist. The statist thrives upon their victimhood. That gives them the power. It gives them the power to have a dog and take the dog anywhere they want. Well, you can't say anything to me about my dog because this is a fucking handicapped dog. I know handicapped is politically incorrect. It's an assistance animal, whatever the fuck it's called. And it is illegal for you to ask me why I have the dog. That is power that comes from victimhood. In theory, in the United States, we have under this illusion that we have freedom of speech. But your freedom of speech does not include asking a person with a fucking guide dog why they have a guide dog, because that's illegal. Their victimhood gives them the power to control the words that come out of your mouth. Keep telling yourself you're not a slave. Keep telling yourself you're not a fucking slave. Victimhood. When you listen to this podcast and you get your fucking feelings hurt and you leave nasty comments on the podcast, on YouTube or on Google Plus or on Facebook, wherever the fuck it is, your victimhood, your hurt feelings are what give you power. They get you feeling all self-righteous. And if you want to, one of these days it'll happen. We all know this. Eventually my shit will get banned on YouTube or Google Plus or whatever because some victim will use their victimhood as an avenue to power to report me for hate speech. Because anything they don't like is hate speech. Hate speech itself, that's a manifestation of the victimhood. Somebody says something I don't like, I'm a victim. That's hate. No, it just means other people saying shit you don't like. Fucking deal with it. People say shit I don't like all the time. It's not hate speech. It's shit that I don't like. They may be wrong. I may not like it. It might hurt my feelings, but it's not hate. Because I'm not a fucking victim. Your hurt feelings give you the power via victimhood. I'm a victim. Oh, that was so hateful. The princess vampire that I was talking about in a couple of podcasts ago, that we have to, when we hang out with her, we have to sit inside the building. We can't sit outside on the patio because if sunlight touches her precious skin, she'll get sunburned because she's not smart enough to wear some fucking sunscreen. Again, she's a victim. She's a victim of the sun. If the sun touches her, she sunburns. Victimhood. Her victimhood gives her power over the group to control where we sit. Everybody else wants to sit outside on the patio. But we can't sit outside on the patio. No. Because the victim in the group has all the power. She has to sit inside. And because nobody else in the group, other than myself, is willing to tell her to go fuck herself, she gets the power. This is how victimhood gives you that. This is why black people are taught all the time by their so-called leaders to keep playing the racism and the slave card. Because as long as black people are victims, that's their source of power. This is why women are told by the feminist statist that they're victims all the time. Because their victimhood is their source of power for the feminist statist, for the black leaders. Unlike the black leaders who think that black people can't get a job without affirmative action, I think black people are perfectly capable of getting jobs without affirmative action. But if you're a black person and if you can get a job without the government helping you, then you don't need the government. And if you're not needing the government, then the government has no reason for you to exist. I've said this a million times before. The government needs a population which is 99% victims and 1% producers, because you take from the producers and you give it to the victims, and the victims continue to support the government via democracy. This is why victimhood is so important to the government. This is why you've got all these morons who call themselves the leaderships of the black people, the Al Sharpton and Jesse Jackson and shit, running around telling black people that all white people hate them and they're victims and all this other shit. The government needs black people to remain victimized. The femistatist. This is why they're always telling women that men are all sexist and men just want to rape them, and they need more free abortions and more free birth control, and all the evil men are trying to stop them from getting their abortions and their birth control, and on and on and on and on, because they want women to continue being victims. As I have said ad nauseum before, the femistatist movement, the leaders of the femistatist movement, the femistatists want women to be raped. More women getting raped means more victims. More victims means more power for the femistatist and more power for the government. I'll talk about this in depth later on. Read another article. So apparently these 4 douchebags, maybe 5, I don't know, some bunch of douchebag guys invented a nail polish that detects the so-called date rape drug, which doesn't really exist, but that's another topic. And I mean, date rape drugs, it's called alcohol. Has anybody fucking heard of that? I love how... Anyway, I will also have to remember to show the video where a woman in a bar dumps drugs into a man's drink while everybody is watching her do it, and not one person says a fucking word, right? Because in our society, it's okay for women to drug men in order to take advantage of them. It's only wrong for men to drug women and take advantage of them. That's your first clue that the femistatists don't really give a shit about anything other than creating more victims. Anyhow, the fuck was I going with this? The douchebags created a nail polish which you stick your finger into your drink and it changes color if the date rape drug is in there or something like that. I mean, you know what, that's fine. I'm making fun of them, but I really don't have a problem with this. Because again, this is a problem. Date rape drugs being put into people's drinks. This is a problem being solved by innovation, technology, free market, capitalism. It's wonderful. Everything's fine. A femistatist in the college newspaper here wrote an op-ed piece saying that she's opposed, let me say it again, she is opposed to this nail polish being available because it's victim blaming. See, if you provide a woman with the tools to help her avoid being raped, to a femistatist, that is blaming the woman for being raped. Now, I understand this makes no sense. I can't fucking explain to you how they even fucking get that. Other than just the pure entitlement. Actually, I can. It's the pure entitlement. Saying to a woman, here is a tool that you can use to prevent yourself from being raped. To say that that is victim blaming is just like saying to a woman, here is some Obamacare health insurance that will help you provide yourself with free birth control pills. And even that, I'd say, is victim blaming, because what the femistatists ultimately want, the femistatists don't want women to have to purchase Obamacare to get free birth control. The femistatists believe women should just get the free birth control. The femistatists believe women should just get the free abortions. Hell, they should just get free health care. They shouldn't need to pay for it, because expecting a woman to do anything at all, to acquire and use a tool to provide for herself, is victim blaming. This is what I'm saying. Here's an opportunity for fewer women to be raped. And femistatist, or at least this one specific femistatist, is opposed to it. Why? Because femistatists want women to get raped. More women being raped means more victims. When you are a statist, you need as many people as possible to be victims. By making sure women don't have access to any kind of tool that would reduce their chances of being raped. They can't get the nail polish that detects date rape drugs. They can't get smartphone apps that summon people to help them. They can't get self-defense classes. They can't learn how to use and carry a handgun. No, we've got to stop women from doing all of this stuff. Women should be able to just go out, have no tools in their arsenal at all, have no training, have no knowledge, have no ability at all to prevent themselves from being raped. And they should be totally safe. And of course, the femistatists know that this isn't true, because the femistatists, of course, many of them are mothers. They've raised their own children. All of these boys who are out here raping these women, and there will always be rape. There will always be rape until the day that the state ceases to exist and we no longer circumvent evolution and natural selection. As long as because the government not only wants the women to be helpless, the government wants men to be rapists. This is why men are put in 12 years of public school and ignored. This is why so many men are put into prison, where they get all this bitterness and hatred for the world, which they're happy to take out raping women. This is why single motherhood is encouraged, so that men, boys, guys grow up without a father figure in their life who can teach them how to fucking relate to women and initiate sex with women, all this other stuff. This is why boys go to college and they're told if you talk to a woman, you're raping her. If you look at a woman too long, it's sexual harassment. If you're going to have sex with a woman, you have to get permission. You have to stop and ask her, is it okay if I touch you? Okay, is it okay if I put my other hand on you? Okay, is it okay if I look at you? Okay, is it okay if I kiss you once? Okay, can I have permission to kiss you? Right, all of this shit is designed to completely fuck men up, so they have no idea what the fuck they're doing when it comes to dealing with a woman. You couple this with women who are completely fucking helpless, completely unable. They can't even say the word no. Speaking from experience, women, you're just like, hey, you want to go? Oh yeah, and then they flake out. It's a manifest. I ask women out, so you want to go out? Oh yeah, here's my number, blah blah. You contact them, and it's like it's nothing. Which, and I'm not upset because I'm being rejected. I'm upset. I'm not even upset. The problem here, the problem I'm pointing out, isn't that women are rejecting me. I'm a man. I'm fucking used to that. Men get rejected by women all the time. That's part of being a man. The problem here is that you have these women who don't even have the fucking balls, spine, courage, whatever, to actually just say to a man, no, I'm not interested, just leave me alone. They will pretend they're interested and then ignore you because they don't even have what it takes to tell you to your face they're not interested. They're complete fucking cowards in every imaginable way. And you mix women who are complete cowards, who can't defend themselves physically, who are completely spineless. You mix them with boy men who are fucked up emotionally, who have been neglected by their mothers, who have spent all their life being told that they're rapists. You're going to get rape. And this is exactly what the state and the femistatists want. Because this is how you create victims. And then, once the woman has been raped, or even claimed to have been raped, as a victim, she now has shit tons of power. She can accuse people of rape and automatically be believed. Or if the woman gets pregnant, she's a victim. She had no responsibility for getting pregnant for having sex. No, she's a victim. The man will now have to pay for the child for the rest of his life, even if it isn't his. It's always victimhood. Victimhood is the path to power. I can't go out and get free shit given to me because I'm not a victim. I can't point a finger at somebody and have that person put into a cage because I'm not a victim. I can't get ramps built for me so it's easier for me to get inside a building because I'm not a victim. I can't get free birth control because I'm not a victim. As long as the state exists, there must be fear in the 99% in order for the state to continue to be accepted. Without the fear, there is no acceptance of the state. In order to perpetuate the fear among the sheeple, the state must make sure there are always groups of people who need protection. And the reason they need this protection is because they're being victimized. They're being victimized by men via rape. They're being victimized by the rich via capitalism. They're being victimized by those evil Muslims via terrorism. What's this ISIS shit? Where did this come from? What the fuck is ISIS? How is it that there are these things like Al-Qaeda? I watched this. Interestingly enough, I saw this documentary in a fucking class. It wasn't poli-sci. It was like international relations class at CSU, like a 101 level. The professor who was teaching it showed a British documentary made by the BBC. You may have heard of them. They're this evil right-wing organization that supports the NRA and stuff, I'm sure. The British Broadcasting Corporation made this documentary in which they put forth and supported the thesis that there is in fact no such organization as Al-Qaeda. That Al-Qaeda is a fictitious organization created by the government of the United States in name only so that they could say, hey, these people are a member of Al-Qaeda, and lump them all in and use RICO laws against them, in addition to just giving it a more convenient way to frighten the American population. But of course, most of you will have never seen this and never will see this because you don't expose yourself to the news media of foreign countries, which if you looked at like what the British and the Germans and the French and all these other hairy Europeans and even the Russians, if you looked at what other countries say about the United States in their mainstream media, you would honestly wonder to yourself, what country are they talking about? Because that can't possibly be America. Not everybody loves us as much as you think, even with Obama as the president. So the point is, I had a point somewhere, what was it? Oh, victims, terrorism, victims, right? There's always a victim. Women are the victims of men. Poor people are the victims of the rich. Everybody in America is the victims of the Muslims. If you don't vote for me in this upcoming election, you're going to be a victim of my opponent. My opponent is going to cut your Social Security, or my opponent's going to cut your welfare, or my opponent's going to raise your taxes, or whatever. You're going to be a victim. Everybody's a victim. There's a constant need to create victim after victim after victim. And all of you out there who are statists, you're not just victims, you're willing victims. You refuse to be competent. You refuse to acquire the tools to make more money, to provide for yourself, to prevent yourself from being raped, to defend your own home, to negotiate for what you want, to provide for your own education, to raise your own children. All of these things, you refuse to put any effort into acquiring the tools and the skills you need to do those things. You just want the government to do it for you. You play the part of the victim. And you play it well because you recognize your own incompetence. You recognize that you cannot provide for yourself. And all of this would be fine if it wasn't for the fact that people like myself and other anarcho-capitalists who are competent, who are not victims, and who don't want to be victims, we're the ones who have to fucking carry you. We're the ones who have to provide for you. We're the ones who pay the taxes. We're the ones who produce. I mean, those wheelchairs that those handicapped people were in, those wheelchairs weren't built by cripples. Well, actually, some of them might have been. The actual assembly of nuts and bolts is in fact done by the slaves. Let me rephrase what I'm saying. The company that builds the wheelchairs, a massive amount of resources that have to be brought together to make a wheelchair, right? You need plastic. Plastic is a petrochemical. You get that from the oil industrial complex. That plastic in your wheelchair, that had to be sucked out of the ground by a drilling rig. It had to be transported across the country. It had to be refined by one of these oil corporations that you hate so fucking much. It had to be processed into plastic. It had to be molded into the parts that go on the wheelchair. And then it had to be shipped, yet again, in trucks burning fossil fuels provided by the corporations that you hate so much, had to be shipped to the place where the wheelchair is manufactured. Now, some fucking slave may have put the wheelchair together, but all those resources were necessary just to make the plastic. Now, the metal had to be dug out of the ground, mining, probably strip mining, which destroys the environment. You care about the environment so much, don't you? Because you're a fucking victim. So then again, the metal has to be refined, has to be smelted, has to be purified, has to be driven around in trucks all over the place, has to be put on railroad cars, has to be pulled by trains. All this metal finally comes and it shows up. All of this coordination to make all of this happen, that's not done by a victim. That's not done by one of you. Because anybody who's smart enough to do all of that probably is not a victim. Again, it's the 1%. There's this small group of people who can make all of this happen, who can get all of these resources, and yeah, they're making money in the process, but that's because they're being rewarded for being competent. There's a small group of people who make sure that all of this metal and all of this plastic needed to build the wheelchair for this fucking handicapped victim who's so discriminated against. There's a small number of people who oversee this entire process and make it happen, so that you victims can get your free fucking wheelchairs. If everybody was a victim, you wouldn't have a wheelchair. If everybody was a victim, you'd be dead. If evolution and natural selection were allowed to run their course, you'd be dead. But playing the victim card is what keeps you alive. It's time for us, as anarcho-capitalists, to start coming to terms with the fact that statists do not deserve our respect. They don't deserve our compassion. They don't even deserve for us to be nice to them. As I've said before, these are people who want us to die. Or at the very least, they want us to be put in cages. Now, in all honesty, we should reflect on the fact that I want them to die. The difference is, they, the statists, want those of us who are anarcho-capitalists to die by being killed by the government so that they can keep getting free things. I, as an anarcho-capitalist, I want these statists to die via their own action or inaction because natural selection and evolution work. The statist wants me to be pushed in front of an oncoming train by somebody else when I can see the train coming. I want the statist to be hit by the train because they're standing on the train track ignoring the train, and I said to them, hey man, there's a train coming, you might want to move. And the statist says to me, I don't have to move, I'm transgendered. You're homophobic. I don't have to move, I'm a woman. You hate women. I don't have to move, I'm black. You hate black people. And then I want the train to hit them because look, you're standing in front of the train. I tried to help you move. You didn't want to move. Now you're dead. That's evolution. That's natural selection. That's what we need more of. If natural selection were allowed to take place, victimhood would be gone. 7 or 8 days is about all it would take for all of the victims to be killed off by their own stupidity. Once there are no victims, there is no fear. And once there is no fear, there's no longer any reason for the state to exist and no support for the state. And the whole thing comes tumbling down. It's all a matter of not denying science and embracing natural selection.